Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, July 9th, 2021. Time for another show. Are you ready? I hope someone is. Someone ought to be ready for this here at some point. Okay, on our own for this Friday with lots to catch up on and questions about what direction to go when it comes to reporting on the new stuff or giving you some things that might have slipped through the cracks during the past week or so, or year, or whatever period of time you might want to cover, to get you ready for the weekend. Because, I don't know, I've always had this concept that during the weekends you guys are having, like, vigorous debates with various people all over the country, even though we've mostly been locked up in our houses due to the coronavirus pandemic. But, hey, I guess we're getting out now, and we've always had these telephones, and there's these things we can use to get together with people even at a distance. Even if you're fully vaccinated and getting back together again, people are still enjoying the convenience of being able to do it from their own homes. And yet, I've never actually heard feedback from any of you that, yes, you saved me in the weekend's critical debate by preparing me with the stories that we ought to be debating as a society but have not yet gotten to. I don't know. I guess I'm just imagining that all of this is happening, but it feels like a good use of the Friday space nonetheless. So we go ahead with that plan anyway. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. This is also part of the plan. Bill tells us from Portland, Maine, how he plans to spend his next 2 hours, expecting me to live up to these expectations. Let's see. Today, Kagro X. Me, David Waldman, will charge his equipment and electricity costs, so this is a good idea, to the Secret Service. I should have thought of this. It's a fantastic idea, since apparently they'll pay for anything these days if you send them a bill. This apparently is true. One of these stories that I thought we might get to at some point. Actually, I kind of thought we'd get to it yesterday, but I never did. But now it's all written up and available in the Washington Post. Good idea, Bill. I think this is the place to start. Because one of our favorites, David Farenthold, back on the case and basically telling us the same story over and over again. But it's worth reminding us that we're paying an awful lot of money for the protection, can you believe it, of Donald Trump. Really, I have no idea why anyone would want to protect him, but you know, he's also a very big, strongly kind of person and can totally protect himself, I'm sure. But, yeah, he's, since we've alleged that the guy was elected president, he's been apparently, quote unquote, entitled to protective services, even though he won't, he too won't take yes for an answer. They would like to come and protect him, but he feels like he needs to throw barriers up in the path of their ability to protect him by charging them money for the privilege of protecting him. And, well, here's the story. Trump's charged the Secret Service nearly $10,200 in May alone. Now, this May that they're talking about was part of the year we know as 2021, during which time Donald Trump was not president of the United States. But as you know, out of a sense of decorum and tradition, we protect our former presidents because there could be a lot of people who are angry with them and perhaps might want to do them some harm. I think that, there's probably a lot of people who think that about Donald Trump in particular. I'm surprised there aren't more, but this is the case with all presidents, as you know. I think what's unusual is how much money Donald Trump continues to make from people hating him and the federal government providing him for free with protective services. It's not enough that it be for free. He feels that they should pay for the privilege of executing this mission. And there's a lot of things that people would pay for the privilege of executing when you're talking about Donald Trump. But this is a different one. This is the United States government paying for the ability to stay close enough to him to protect him from, I presume, assassination. I think that's probably the chief worry, but probably also a bunch of other things like, I don't know, having rotten tomatoes or eggs thrown at him. I'm not really certain what it is he thinks he's being protected from, but at any rate, this is what we do. Now, why we pay for it, I have no idea. I understand the mechanism, and you do too, and let's just read through it the way David Fahrenholt puts it, because it's quite annoying enough even if you accept the premise of all of this. Former President Donald Trump's golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, charged the Secret Service nearly $10,200 for guest rooms used by his protective detail during Trump's first month at the club during this summer, newly released spending records show. They are getting faster at releasing their spending records. That's nice. The records, released by the Secret Service in response to a public records request, shows that the ex-president has continued a habit he began in the first days of his presidency, charging rent to the agency that protects his life. Since Trump left office in January, U.S. taxpayers have paid Trump's businesses more than $50,000 for rooms used by Secret Service agents, records show. The Washington Post reported previously that Trump's Mar-a-Lago club, where he lived from January, when he left the White House, to early May, charged the Secret Service more than $40,000 so that agents could use a room near Trump. These newly released records provide the first proof that when Trump moved north to Bedminster, the invoices kept coming. Now, I don't know who needed proof of that. I guess it's always, a wise practice. If you are going to be accusing him of doing this, you might as well check periodically to see whether it's still happening. Just that's good practice for journalists and people involved in public debate, generally speaking. But on the other hand, you must kick yourself at the end of it, like saying, what could I have used that time for that I spent trying to prove the answer to the question, is Donald Trump chiseling the United States government for extra cash that he can put in his pocket? Of course the answer is yes. You must feel like an idiot at the end of your research. The Secret Service released a bill it paid to Trump Bedminster in May, totaling $10,199.52. As you can see, they rounded up in the headline. The agency redacted the nightly rate, which, I don't know if any of you guys know, but it's a national security secret how many days there are in May. But if you know that, if you have one of my NAFTA calendars that I snuck in over the border, you could probably figure out, what the nightly rate was, because he was there nightly. He doesn't go places. All right. So this is the news. The bill was an exact multiple of what Trump Bedminster charged the Secret Service while Trump was still in office. He hasn't raised his prices. I mean, I guess we should be thankful for that somehow. But there you go. While he was in office, he charged $566.64 per night for a 4-bedroom, quote, cottage on the property. I don't know why it's in quotes, I guess if they call it a cottage, it's a cottage. I mean, who knows? Anyway, so the big mystery is, well, how many days are there in May? And then you can take the $10,199.52, divide it by the number of days there are in May, and I don't know. I mean, is that the exact math? Or maybe if you know how many days they actually spent there, But now I'm curious. Like, I just got to figure this out. $10,199. I have a calculator on my phone, and so I use it. Like, I don't know. I think like the phone authorities will come and confiscate it if I don't use it enough. But I like figuring these things out. So how many days are there in May? 31, right? So $10,199.52 divided by 31 is not this number. So I guess they may have... here we are. They were there for 18 nights, and that's the answer. But divided by 31, it's a much better rate of $329, and we'll round up to 2 cents per night if they were there every single night. But I guess they weren't. And I don't know what may have had them move. I don't think he stayed overnight anywhere else, but he might have gone, I don't know, who knows, to Trump Tower, back to Mar-a-Lago, some other club. Anyway, I really have no idea why they redact the nightly rate. I mean, I don't know. I mean, unless they really are trying to somehow cover up how many, not cover up, but, make it difficult to guess for security purposes. How many nights were they actually there? Although why, I have no idea. If the president's there, they're there, or the ex-president is there, I'm sure they're there. And I don't know whether they want to let anybody know that sometimes they're there when he's not there. You got me. Anyway, I don't think that's the important part of this. At any rate, where were we? At that rate, right, a bill from May 2021 would have paid for 18 nights at the cottage. Trump arrived in Bedminster on May 9th, so he wasn't there the whole time. Okay. The bill from May is the only one that the Secret Service has released from Trump's time at Bedminster this year, but the agency released another document showing that charges probably continued after that. It released an internal document called a hotel request, or rather a hotel request form, covering the period from May 28th to July 1st. The form showed that agents planned to rent rooms at Bedminster through at least the start of July. Separately, the Secret Service also released other bills showing $3,400 in charges from Trump Bedminster before Trump himself arrived. Those receipts from January, February, and early May did not say why the Secret Service was at the club. And I guess if you wanted to redact that, that would make more sense to me than the rate. Neither Trump's family business, the Trump Organization, now indicted, nor Trump's political operation responded to a request for comment. A Secret Service spokeswoman declined to comment, saying the agency does not talk about protective operations. Legal experts have said there are no laws to prohibit Trump's company from charging the Secret Service rent at his properties. That's true. Either during or after his presidency. The rate is effectively up to him. By law, the Secret Service can pay whatever it must to rent rooms near its protectees for use as command posts and meeting rooms. So I guess in that context, I guess it actually is sort of astonishing that Trump hasn't raised the rates. Like, why not $1,000 a night if they'll pay it? But that's my real question is, why do they pay it? I mean, I know it's the federal government and they like to be reliable and they don't like to, walk away from their debts. But I mean, I think there's about 1,000 people who could tell you, yeah, sure, they don't mind walking away from their debts actually. But just thinking economically about it, what happens if you don't pay? Does Trump kick you out? Does Trump say, oh, yeah, well, then don't protect me from assassination? I really have no idea what anybody thinks is going to happen here. But I get that they're trying to be the grown-ups in the situation. But, I mean, maybe you do intend to pay. Just delay for a while. Just do what he would do. I mean, he would stiff you in an instant, right? I mean, he is stiffing you in that he's charging the Secret Service to stay near enough to protect him. Most people would consider that to be a pretty big favor, and that is free from the government would be enough for them. And they would say, you know what, it comes out in the wash. I'll give you the cottage for free. No one was renting it, believe me. But yeah, I'm curious what would happen if they just didn't pay. Would he sue? That would be really interesting. Speaking of which, he has another lawsuit going on. Greg mentioned it yesterday. I think I put away an article that will explain a little bit about what he's attempting to do, which is, he's attempting to grift, but it'll give you the theory behind his lawsuit. And if I read the headline correctly, it will explain, the article will explain just how dumb the theory is, and that's always kind of fun. Well, anyway, there's still more to this article. The service is more focused on the protective necessity as opposed to how much is it going to cost after the fact. There's nothing that they can do if rates are high, said Jonathan Kagro, a longtime Secret Service agent who now works for the consulting firm Teneo. Don't know that consulting firm, but why would I? It's a question of not can they do it, but should they be charging that much? The scale of Trump's charges appears to be unusual among recent presidents and vice presidents. In recent history, the Post could find only one other protected person who has charged the Secret Service rent, Joe Biden. And I know that'll take the edge off of it for a lot of people, but they don't listen to this show. As vice president, Biden charged the Secret Service $2,200 per month to use a cottage on his property in Delaware. In total, Biden received $171,600 between 2011 and 2017. Biden has not charged the Secret Service rent since becoming president in January, a White House spokesman said. The charges from Trump's company exceed Biden's lifetime total, by March 2017, Trump's third month in office, according to records obtained by the Post. So if you are the kind of person, I don't know what you're doing here, but if you're the kind of person inclined to say, oh yeah, well, Joe Biden charged the Secret Service rent, then be aware that over the entire, 2011 to 17, so 11 to 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 6 years worth of charging this money, he totaled, $171,600, and Trump did that in 3 months because his costs are exorbitant. There's $2,000 for the month for the Secret Service at Joe Biden's place, $500+ a night at Donald Trump's place, and then 4 years worth of that, and then who knows how long this goes on for afterwards. Anyway, as we said, the charges from Trump's company exceeded Biden's lifetime total by March of 2017, Trump's third month in office, according to records obtained by the Post. Trump's company charged the State Department to host summits with foreign leaders, the Secret Service for rooms while protecting Trump and his children, and the Defense Department for aides accompanying the president to Mar-a-Lago and to his Irish golf club. In all, Trump's company charged the government more than $2.5 million during his presidency, according to a Post-analysis of federal spending records. And I believe they'll probably unearth a lot more in incidental expenses along the way. But, by the way, just to go back to the theme, State Department was charged to host summits with foreign leaders. It's one of a million stupid offhand promises or whatever that Trump made during his campaign in 2016 that are, that fell by the wayside and were immediately violated by him. And one of the least important things that he did, but, just so that people remember that his whole argument at first for being president was, well, I own all these properties, so when we do things like have summits with foreign leaders at fancy hotels, there's no bill to the government. I'm going to save the government so much money because they don't have to bill because I already own these properties. I'm going to save so much money. But in fact, of course, not only did they paid more than usual because they paid an exorbitant rate at a stupid, over-decorated hotel. You might as well have had the summit at a cheesecake factory. And then, two, the money goes into his pocket. He owns it. He could have waived the fees, but Donald Trump never waives fees for anything. It's just, I don't know. I mean, that was the basis on which a lot of Trump fans, well, he's a billionaire. He doesn't even need to take a salary, and we'll save all his money on official events. No, you won't. No, you won't. It's unclear how the Trump organization set the rates that it charges for the Secret Service at Mar-a-Lago or Bedminster. It's made up. But before the Post revealed the extent of the charges, Trump's son Eric said in 2019 that the rate was, quote, like $50 per night, off by about a factor of 10, 11, but never mind that. The Post has now examined charges for more than 3,600 nights at Trump properties and found no rates that low. Instead, at Mar-a-Lago, the rates range from $396.15 to $650 per room. At Bedminster, the rate for the 4-room Saracen cottage was $566.64. Like I said, more than 11 times the rate that idiot Eric Trump claimed on television. As former president, Trump is entitled to a government pension of $219,000 per year. The General Services Administration said he has received $99,323 of it. $99,323 of it as of this week. You'll recall, of course, the big show that Trump made of donating his presidential salary about 2 or 3 times that he actually, I think, followed through and did it. He may have donated all of it, I don't know, but they only made a big enough deal out of it to break through the news 2 or 3 times. But no such luck with his pension. I guess he's keeping that. Jordan Leibowitz of the group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, said that in light of Trump's other assets and income, he should consider allowing the Secret Service to stay at his properties for free. He obviously should have Secret Service protection. I don't know how obvious that is, Leibowitz said. However, Leibowitz said there's no reason that his company should not do the patriotic thing and just comp the government for the security it's providing him. That's true. That's what they should do. And quite honestly, that's what the government should assume is happening. And just say, send him a letter. I assume your bill is a joke, Mr. President. Very funny. Real hilarious. We're not paying. You can sue us if you like, but of course that's just going to cost the government more money. And you'll lose this. I don't know whether he would actually lose this suit. He probably wouldn't. There's no law against his charging it. But then, I don't know. I guess if the Justice Department is in court insisting that Secret Service and other police agencies have the right to use deadly force to clear people out of a space that a president says he wants to occupy for no particular reason, like Lafayette Square Park, then I don't know. I don't see that it's a huge leap for them to then say, we need to clear out whoever was going to rent this at current market rates and occupy this space in order to protect the president, or in this case, the former president. And look, if we can use deadly force to do it, then certainly simply refusing to pay a bill would be within our power as well, don't you think? And see if Merrick Garland doesn't send someone to court to try and defend that position. I don't know. I think it's just a little bit weird, though, and had quite enough of Donald Trump at this point. Can't we just get rid of him? All right, let's see. I mentioned other stories that were related, and now I forget exactly what we were talking about. Oh, yes, right, the lawsuit that he had filed. BuzzFeed News took that up just the other day, and Zoe Tillman, I don't know if she calls herself Zoe, but at any rate, Tillman here has covered this angle on the lawsuit. Trump's social media lawsuits feature a mashup of arguments courts have already rejected. Not surprising. It's a little bit like all his Kraken lawsuits, all stuff that just, if it wasn't so annoying and wasn't costing people time and money to try and dispense with, they would laugh at if filed in court. Trump was, of course, as you know, kicked off of Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube for inciting the January 6th riots at the U.S. Capitol. That, according to the subheader on this piece here, and that is what is at the heart of the suits. He says he's, due some damages from these companies that have decided that they would rather not have him on their platform. So let's see what this is about. Former President Donald Trump's latest attempts at getting back on mainstream social media platforms came in the form of lawsuits on Wednesday against Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, each featuring a series of claims that multiple courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, have rebuffed. And by the way, we might also take a moment here to say that it used to be the Republican line, like past or at the end of the 2000 election, for instance, in the flurry of lawsuits that followed, the Republican line was that Democrats were sore losers and whiners for suing over all these things. Of course, they forgot all about that when Donald Trump filed 60-something lawsuits in I don't know how many states to try and undo this election. But that was a very strongly America, USA kind of a thing to do. Whereas when Democrats do it, it's horrible and weak. And here he is suing over being thrown off of YouTube and Instagram. And once again, his supporters are insisting how strongly amazing America it is to do. But worse than that, it's all garbage. Trump was suspended from all of these social media platforms in the immediate aftermath of the January 6th riots at the U.S. Capitol, blocked from YouTube a few days later. All three companies cited posts that encouraged or supported the violence. He'd previously had messages that promoted baseless claims of voter fraud flagged as misleading or in violation of platform rules. He remains banned from posting on all three sites now. By the way, he should have been banned for coronavirus misinformation as well. On Wednesday, Trump filed lawsuits against each company, joined by co-plaintiffs who claimed they were also banned from posting or had their content, largely posts about the coronavirus pandemic, vaccines, and mask-wearing rules, demonetized, boo-hoo, removed, or flagged as misleading. Each case raises the same two core claims: that the social media giants were operating as a state actor, which they're not, and had violated the First Amendment, which they hadn't because they're not state actors, when they restricted certain speech, and that the federal law that immunizes these companies against being sued for how they moderate content, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, was itself unconstitutional, or as they like to say in legal parlance, unconstitutional. Trump isn't the first person to try to apply the First Amendment, which deals with government regulation of speech, to a private company, or even the first conservative to go after these specific social media companies, but similar efforts have failed to gain traction in court. That's a kind way of putting it. It was all thrown out as complete crap, because it is. You're alleging state action by a non-state actor. I mean, you just can't survive round one of that. But there they are, filing it anyway. Caitlin Vogus, rhymes with bogus, but at any rate, with a V, I'm guessing she pronounces it that way, deputy director of the Free Expression Project at the Center for Democracy and Technology, said she wasn't aware of any courts that had found the First Amendment applicable to the editorial judgments of private companies. And that's because it just effing isn't. And I mean, that's all there is to it. There's not a great deal of sophisticated argument I can give you. It's just like, I don't know what to tell you. It's just, that's not what this law, that's not what this constitutional principle is about. Sorry. You have to leave. Well, there's much more sophisticated analysis of the problem and their approach and just how stupid their filings really are. And we'll review that over the next 2 minutes while I take a quick break and decide whether it's worth spending more time on this idiocy. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. It makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I don't know. I think it's worth doing. Sometimes when you call out stupidity, we benefit from having the specifics. Just before the break, we cut off our reading of this here. I'll continue in just a second. Karen, thanks for chiming in here on the David Farentholt story about Trump charging the Secret Service for the cottage on his property at Bedminster. She says, I believe Farentholt said, I don't know whether he said it in this article, and I missed it, but I think you're right. I think he's said in the past that the Secret Service is charged whether or not they occupy the space, but I think they reserve it, for the entirety of the month or whatever space of time that they're going to be there. There have been certainly there have been Farenthold reports in the past. It's just sort of a permanent fixture. At least when he was president, there was a permanent rental, essentially, of these spaces. So they were paying for spaces at Bedminster, even if he was at Mar-a-Lago. I think that's how I recall it, too. So that just makes the accounting of it all that more odd. And their redaction, I mean, I guess somewhere you could convince me, someone from the logistics department, I'm sure, at the Secret Service, and say, well, we give you all the basic information that you need to figure it out, but for purposes of, not disclosing methods, protection methods, we don't want to just admit up front how many days we were there versus not there. I know that makes it difficult for you to figure out what the per diem is, but you get a pretty good idea of how much is being paid. And really, I don't know if you have to get the daily rate or not, but except insofar as there's a need to disprove Eric Trump's claims. Well, Eric Trump's claims are completely ridiculous. That has nothing to do with the amount of money that they're actually being charged. And that's kind of the bottom line on that. But, all right, we still have a pretty good idea of how much time they're spending there and he's spending there regardless. So now back over to his stupid lawsuit over being banned from social media platforms. The U.S. Supreme Court and federal appeals and district courts, that's basically all the federal courts, all the regular Article 3 federal courts that there are for normal civil complaints, have repeatedly rejected efforts to classify social media platforms as state actors whose decisions to restrict speech would fall under the First Amendment. Trump's lawsuits refer to Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube each as a public forum, which I guess they sort of kind of are, or, in the vernacular sense, but not the legal sense. They're not public entities. They're just not. And one of his main arguments is that the efforts to restrict participation in those spaces violates the First Amendment. The Supreme Court actually has treated something like this. It rejected a similar argument in 2019 in an opinion by drunk beer hat wearing Justice Brett Kavanaugh, one of Trump's nominees, in case you forgot. The court found that the First Amendment didn't apply to the operator of public access channels that had suspended producers over content. Different kind of case, sort of. I mean, different case, obviously. Different plaintiffs, different defendants, etc. But I think it covers the concept pretty well. But, in Trump world, if there's no ruling that says Donald Trump can't do this, they file anyway. And if there is one that says Donald Trump can't do this, they just figure, well, it doesn't say I can't do this, which is exactly the same thing, but, that's kind of the way he operates. Kavanaugh wrote that opening up a media platform to the public did not transform a private company into a state actor, because it doesn't. He cited a line of cases upholding the right of private entities that function as spaces for public speech to exercise editorial discretion, and warned that trying to apply the First Amendment would run up against the constitutional protections that private property owners enjoy. Yes, there will be unforeseen consequences. If every place that the public is allowed to go by permission of the owner is now public, well, you just lost all your property rights. Oh, but I didn't mean that. I just want them to give me a lot of money. Well, there's no law for that one. I mean, but couldn't you make it up? You should just do it. Oh, I hadn't thought about that, and maybe I should do that in the future. That's the way I'm going to handle your elections cases next time around, so I might as well just practice for it now. In the 2 years since the 2019 decision in Manhattan Community Access Corp. Versus Halleck came down, lower courts have applied its reasoning specifically to reject First Amendment claims filed by conservatives against social media platforms. Those included a February 2020 decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit rejecting claims by Prager University, a conservative content company, against YouTube, and a May 2020 decision from the D.C. Circuit tossing claims brought by far-right activist Laura Looney Loomer against Twitter and Facebook. I mean, if that's not right on in context, I don't know what to tell you. Right on point. Less than a week ago, a federal district judge in Tallahassee blocked a Florida law. This was interesting, right? Remember this one? We didn't discuss it a great deal, but I know we made some mention of DeSantis' attempt here. Less than a week ago, a federal district judge in Tallahassee blocked a federal law that had strong support from Republicans that would have allowed the state to fine the actual state actor here, the state itself, to fine social media platforms that removed candidates leading up to an election. In the opinion, the judge noted that although it wasn't always settled how the First Amendment should apply to social media companies, one thing that was clear was that these platforms weren't violating the First Amendment when they moderated content, and he cited the Supreme Court's decision in Halleck. The state has asserted it is on the side of the First Amendment. The plaintiffs are not. It is perhaps a nice soundbite, but the assertion is wholly at odds with the accepted constitutional principles. U.S. District Judge Robert Hinkle wrote. Some academics have argued that Halleck, the case, didn't grapple with whether Section 230, the law that provides immunity for companies against claims for restricting speech that would normally be covered by the First Amendment, could turn a private social media company into a state actor. Justice Clarence Thomas has written about his interest in exploring whether social media companies should be entitled to the level of immunity they currently receive, and specifically expressed concern about Twitter's ability to ban a sitting president. No other justice joined his statements. Next up, federal cooperation and coercion. Besides the public forum claim, Trump's lawsuits allege that the social media companies are state actors in part because they acted in coordination with federal officials. The suits state that those federal actors included the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and President Joe Biden's post-election transition team. In other words, if you cooperate with a state entity, you're a state entity. If you answer the questions of, or follow the instructions or take the advice of the Centers for Disease Control, you've just forfeited all your private property and you're now a public entity. That's the claim here. Because it's gimmitarianism. I need this stupid, absolutely absurd concept to be held as true in the face of everything, flying in the face of everything we know about private property and everything we know about what Republicans and conservatives in general want with respect to small government and private property rights. Throw it all out in this case because I might win. I might get some money. I might get some publicity out of it. That's just his general approach to everything. He's also claiming, without evidence, as he frequently does, that the companies were coerced by Democrats in Congress who threatened to strip them of their Section 230 immunity if they didn't restrict conservative speech, and that Section 230 itself represents a government endorsement of unconstitutional censorship. Trump repeatedly called to repeal Section 230 while president and signed an executive order, which Biden has rescinded, with the goal of chipping away at the law's protections. But as with most things legal in nature, he got nowhere with it because he's a dotard and doesn't know what he's doing. Trump was banned from Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube while he was still president, which means the CDC was acting as part of his administration, and Biden's transition team had no authority at that point. The cases try to stretch out the timeline by arguing the decisions to deplatform Trump have remained in effect since he left office, and that other users have been suspended or banned since the new administration came in. Other courts have also rejected versions of these types of claims about Section 230. 2 weeks ago, a federal district judge in San Francisco dismissed a lawsuit against Facebook filed by Children's Health Defense, a group that posted content critical of vaccines, which the social network flagged as false or unreliable, according to the opinion. The lawsuit featured some of the same theories as Trump's latest cases, that Facebook was a federal actor whose content moderation fell under the First Amendment. Similar to the Trump cases, CHD, Children's Health Defense, argued that Facebook was acting in coordination with the CDC to regulate posts about vaccines and COVID-19, and that the company was censoring speech because of threats from Democratic lawmakers to strip companies of their immunity under Section 230. Which is, of course, remember, just like 10 seconds ago, we were just talking about how Trump himself tried to actually do that. But whatever. Now it's evil because Democrats might possibly, I have no evidence for this, have threatened people with the loss of that thing that I actually tried to take away from them, which is bad because they're trying to take it away. So there you go. CHD also argued that the immunity provided by Congress via Section 230 had turned Facebook into a state actor. That's interesting too. Can I use this concept to just, if I can analogize for just a second, I think that maybe there's a similar claim to be made against gun manufacturers because, of course, they're working in coordination with the federal government, which gives them certain protections from suit for the manufacture and distribution of their inherently dangerous products. there should be strict liability for any damages caused by their inherently dangerous products. But they're apparently protected from this, and the fact that they accept this gift from the federal government makes them state actors, and maybe we ought to treat them differently somehow. So just wondering if that might change the outcome of some of our gun cases. The June 29th opinion from U.S. District Judge Susan Ilston rejected all of those arguments. That is to say, everything Trump alleges now has been crapped on as recently as June 29th. She found that CHD failed to show that the CDC or members of Congress had dictated specific content moderation decisions, because they hadn't, to the point that Facebook became a federal actor anyway. The judge noted that this wasn't the only case where a plaintiff had tried to argue that Section 230 turned private companies into state actors, or that threats from lawmakers to roll back Section 230 had coerced social media companies into restricting speech, and those claims had previously failed. Yeah, and it's not the only case to argue this, because you know why? Because these cases are essentially argued on the internet, and someone reads somewhere that, hey, this sounds kind of like legalistic, and the person who wrote it might know what they're talking about. They were theorizing. I mean, it wasn't a good theory to begin with, but they were paid to theorize about things. I guess if they were bloggers, they probably weren't paid for it, but lawyers are paid to theorize such things. Academics theorize such things all the time. But, there was no section in that blog post that says, oh, P.S., these arguments have failed 100 times already, and you will waste your time and money if you use them. They don't tell you that part. So other people file suits saying, I read this on the internet. It's a guy on the internet who uses big words says, well, ordinarily the First Amendment wouldn't apply because these are private companies, but Section 230 turns them into public entities. It doesn't, but it sounded good in the blog post, so I'm going to sue. But there's a real filing fee involved in that, and lawyers' time that they'll bill you for. Not that Trump will pay any of them, but typically speaking, these things cost money. Other potential pitfalls is the next section here. Beyond the merits of the claim Trump is raising, the structure of his lawsuits presents a few other possible hurdles from the start, because he doesn't know what he's doing. He has presented these cases as class actions, but calling a lawsuit a class action doesn't make it one. Whether or not a class is certified, a step that vastly expands the reach of the claims and the amount of money damages at stake, it's up to the judge to make a decision about that. There's a laundry list of factors that plaintiffs have to satisfy to convince a judge to certify a class. Trump has defined the proposed classes in his lawsuits as all U.S.-based members of the platforms he's suing who, quote, had their access to their social media accounts wrongly restricted or curtailed from June 1st, 2018 through the present. In each case, Trump's legal team estimates that there will be well over 1 million members. One factor that courts consider is whether there's an objective way to decide who is in a class and who isn't. Trump's cases don't include a definition for what it means to be, quote, wrongly kicked off a social media platform, or even what it means to be kicked off a social media platform, really. His lawsuits state that the class would cover anyone whose use of their social media accounts was, quote, curtailed or, quote, limited by Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube because of speech that the companies disliked or contrary to defendants' opinions or beliefs, language that could be open to a wide interpretation. Trump filed all three lawsuits in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida. Mar-a-Lago, which became his full-time residence after he left the White House, is in Palm Beach. Palm Beach, of course, has in hand a written agreement from Donald Trump agreeing that he will never make Mar-a-Lago his full-time residence, but what the hell? You should challenge jurisdiction just based on that. That would be hilarious. You should do that. Tip for the lawyers in this case. His lawyers contend that YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter all do business in Florida. They do. And that a substantial part of the events at issue in these cases took place in Florida. They do too. Trump was president when he was banned from these platforms, which meant he was still residing at the White House in Washington. But his lawyers are arguing that the claims apply to the ongoing restraint of his speech. Each company has terms of service that dictate where any claims must be filed. However, they have those restrictions that terms of service, however. I put the however in the wrong place here. Each company, basically, you sign up, you agree to the terms of service. It says this is where you have to file your claims. And none of them, by the way, are the Southern District of Florida. A fact noted by Reuters reporter Brad Heath. In order to use these platforms, Trump had to accept the company's terms, which require that disputes be litigated in certain courts in California. It's not a deal breaker. Judges can order cases moved to another district if they conclude that a litigant filed in the wrong court, but it's a potential hiccup. So that's a good point, too. Vogus noted that the federal appeals courts that cover California and Florida, the 9th and 11th circuits, respectively, have different precedents about when defendants in First Amendment cases in federal court can try to get claims thrown out under what are known as anti-SLAPP laws. These state laws generally bar lawsuits that are frivolous and aimed at chilling someone's exercise of their free speech rights. Twitter and Facebook have invoked anti-SLAPP laws to try to get claims tossed out that challenged content moderation decisions, and they have had varying success. It's how Twitter in 2018 defeated a lawsuit filed by conservative activist Chuck Johnson. Remember him? He's still alive. After he was suspended for a tweet threatening civil rights activist DeRay McKesson. Federal circuit courts have split on whether these laws can apply to cases in federal court. The 9th Circuit has held that they can, while the 11th Circuit has held that they cannot. A key difference that could open up another legal avenue for Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube if Trump's cases end up moving west. Okay. So, yeah, one reason he wanted to do it in Florida, he's in residence there, even though he's not supposed to be. And another is, the 11th Circuit, I guess, has been more favorable in its rulings on whether or not, I guess, anti-SLAPP suits from the media companies can succeed in dismissing this stuff. They're, I guess, more open to taking these things. All right, so that's pretty interesting. Some commentary along the way here via Twitter. Absinthe noting for us. So if Trump wants to make public definitions apply to Twitter, then his private clubs are now public parks because he has federal officers there with the government paying to protect him. Hey, that's not bad. That's a great thought. I'm glad you sent that over to me. We'll pass that on. I'll retweet that for all of you to see if you are listening live. And if not, well, scroll back and find it. And I'll include it I should include it in the roundup too. That's quite a good point. I mean, it's ordinarily, mind you, it's not a very good point, but in the context in which we're discussing things, it's a fine point. If Trump says this is true, then this part also has to be true, except, of course, if the judge is Gimitarian and says, well, I don't like that part, and so we're not going to allow it. All right. Sometimes we're stuck with that, but I think you make a strong argument there. Good. Keep analogizing on this. Makes the discussion that much more interesting. All right, let's see. Other things that I wanted to share with you. This one I think is maybe a relatively short one, but it might just doom the whole thing by saying this. I had to point this one out because this one really struck me when I saw the other day. Who had sent? I just happened to see the tweet. I don't know who retweeted it into my timeline here from Patrick Tomlinson, who is an author, I think a science fiction author, if I'm reading everything correctly, who just, I thought, had an interesting way of summarizing this news. He's retweeting the tweet of, who are we looking at here? I.J. Bailey. I don't know I.J. Bailey, but he knows me. He's following me, as it turns out. He is a Davidson College professor, and a Harvard Nieman Fellow, as I understand, according to his profile here. So, professor at Davidson College, and has this pickup here, noting with respect to the insanity surrounding opposition to critical race theory, which isn't being taught in any public schools anywhere. But everybody is up in arms as though it were. And how far are they taking it? How ridiculous are they making their claims? As he says here, Professor Bailey says, y'all, even Ruby Bridges is critical race theory now. And he attaches the Substack article here explaining things. It's his own Substack, so we'll read from it. And he does it relatively quickly. And then there's a backup article, some links to sources that might be of some interest too. The little black girl who integrated schools. That's who Ruby Bridges is, in case you didn't remember for some reason. The little black girl who integrated schools is now a threat to white sensibilities, or something. I mean, there's really no other way to put that. Great subheader here. Just wanted to say this quickly, and I appreciate it, about how absurd things have gotten. Now a book about and by. I hope it's not Ruby. Well, I don't know how we're going to answer this one. You know what? It's probably just delivery of a package. We don't actually have to answer the doorbell on this one, but okay. A book about and by Ruby Bridges is considered too dangerous for young white minds to have to grapple with. Yes, that Ruby Bridges, the little black girl with the pigtails who became one of the brave faces of integration. I'm sure you've seen the photos and the Norman Rockwell rendering of the scene of her integrating her public schools. Why? Well, Professor Bailey says here, I'll let the Tennessean tell you when he's quoting from the paper here. One of the books she specifically referenced, one of the complaining parents, I guess, screaming about critical race theory infiltrating their public school systems. One of the books specifically referred to was Ruby Bridges Goes to School. Does that sound like an in-depth probing analysis of critical race theory? No, it's a children's book about this incident, this passage, this point in time, and what it represents and what happened here, the actual history of what went on, but presenting it to children. Written by Ruby Bridges herself, so pretty good bet that there's some significant first-hand knowledge here. Bridges, when she was age 6, was one of the first African-American students to integrate New Orleans' all-white public school system. Steinman, I guess this is maybe the complaining parent, said that the mention of a, quote, large crowd of angry white people who didn't want black children in a white school, unquote, too harshly delineated between black and white people. Well, and that the book didn't offer redemption at its end. Now, I wasn't even really aware that it was critical race theory related to not offer redemption at the end of the book. I mean, if it relates historical events, I don't know what to tell you. Is this an accurate depiction of what happened here? Well, no, because there's no redemption at the end. Well, maybe there was no redemption. To which I'm sure the parents said, well, now we don't do this. Our schools are integrated. So that's redemption. So the story should be told. A crowd of angry white people appeared outside and tried to prevent Ruby from going to school. They were very mad at her and they didn't want black children in their school. Now, eventually, a completely different set of people, maybe not completely different, many of those opposing the integration are, of course, still alive and influential in New Orleans, I'm sure. But eventually, later, a bunch of other people said maybe it would be okay, except if you wanted to talk about it, in which case that was to be opposed at all costs, right? So this is the deal, right? The mention of a large crowd of angry white people somehow delineated between black and white people too harshly. I mean, these people who did this were white. There weren't any black people in the crowd saying, no, boo, go back, get out of here, Ruby. And Ruby wasn't white. So I don't know what to tell you about the delineation. So no redemption at the end is apparently a big deal. So just so you know where the thing came from, he offers up a link to the full article, which hints at a larger, wider examination of what's going on here, called Here's What to Know About the Debate Over Wit and Wisdom Curriculum in Williamson Schools. And he just concludes quickly, this is just ridiculous. Is there a better word for what's happening? I can't think of one. But just by way of giving the full background, I'm curious about what article did this come from? They're discussing here in this June 11th article in the Tennessee in the Williamson area public schools, what the English curriculum should be. Here's what to know about the debate over wit and wisdom curriculum in Williamson schools. It's not critical race theory. They don't call it that. So it has to be about something else, except they're going to make it into critical race theory. Here's what happens. It says here in the caption for the photo here, at least 100 Williamson community members gathered at the local school district's May Board of Education meeting, leaving only standing room for many attendees. Several made public comments about their opposition to critical race theory in local schools, even though it's not there, while others spoke on their support of local diversity and inclusion efforts. Wit and wisdom. What the hell's that? Well, in this case, it's the name of an English language arts curriculum that has been widely criticized in recent weeks by Williamson County parents. It was created by great minds. That's the name of, not that they were great minds necessarily who worked there, but that's the name of the place. It's a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit publisher of curriculum and instructional materials. The company creates curricula in various subjects for pre-K through 12th grade education. According to the Great Minds website, some very loud alarm going off here today, even though the sound's supposed to be all the way down on this thing. According to the Great Minds website, the company's curricula are best in class. That's funny. Double entendre because, of course, they are used in class and apparently a designation they've awarded to themselves. But anyway, they're best in class using research-based instructional methods that are proved to work for all learners and is knowledge-driven and coherent, which is not necessarily the best review for educational materials that I've ever heard in my life, but whatever. They're mediocre minds doing the marketing, but I'm sure great minds are behind the curriculum themselves. The curriculum, though, was selected through Williamson County Schools' curriculum adoption process in April of 2020 and used in K through 5 classrooms this past school year. When we get back, we'll find out what is the specific criticism of this otherwise great-sounding idea. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just at the door, checking out what was going on. It was, in fact, the delivery of a package. We have a reverse Secret Service situation here. Just as we pay Donald Trump for the privilege of assigning Secret Service agents to protect him, I got a package this morning, as we do once a week from, I don't know, it's the Hello Fresh delivery, which could be a sponsored commercial content, could be sponsored commercial content for the show if there were such a deal. But instead, in this situation, I pay Hello Fresh for the privilege of having the show interrupted by the doorbell being rung, and then I have to explain to everybody what's happening. What was this particular interruption? Why, it's the delivery of Hello Fresh, trademark, which something, and then my friend will just naturally come and ask, Hello Fresh, I've heard about them. How can I get fresh, delicious, blah, blah, blah meal kits delivered to my home inconveniently and have the doorbell rung during my podcast? And the answer is, I don't know. First, you'll have to start a podcast. And second of all, why shouldn't I be compensated for it? Anyway, it's a nice service. It works out pretty good. I like it. If you need a meal service, it ain't a bad one. So there you go. Send me a check, or at least comp me my meals. I don't know. I'll do a better job if you comp me my meals. Would that be unethical? Probably. All right. Well, then you'll just have to pay outright, and then I'll just say it's sponsored content, and everyone will be happy. Now, what's the criticism? What the hell is your problem, Williamson County, Tennessee? Well, how much time have you got? I guess. I don't know anything about Williamson County. It's probably a lovely place. But it's also home to at least a couple of idiots. And that's what we'll be spending the next few minutes talking about. What's the criticism? Arguments against the curriculum fall into two buckets. And that's really the problem. Why are these buckets in my way? Who put them here? Is this a safety risk? What does OSHA have to say about these things? The first bucket, I guess, being the belief that wit and wisdom content isn't appropriate for younger students. And the second being that the curriculum teaches concepts of, are you ready for it? Right, you knew what was coming. Critical race theory. I think really the music probably should have followed my use of an echo. Do I have an echo effect anywhere in any of these programs? I don't know. Anyway, just in case you were wondering, critical race theory enters into the situation here. It really doesn't, but they think it does. Community members and local advocacy organizations have come forward in disapproval of books like Ruby Bridges Goes to School, but there's also others. Separate is Never Equal, and George versus George. Their argument being that teaching about the darker aspects of racism, which I didn't know how many light aspects there were of racism that you could teach. Why don't you teach the fun side of racism? I don't know. No materials available for it, I guess. But yes, argument being that teaching about the darker aspects of racism in the United States isn't appropriate for elementary grades. One of the most vocal groups has been the Williamson County chapter of Moms for Liberty. Well, I'm against it already. But okay, Moms for Liberty. This is important. I mean, it's not that moms can't stand or shouldn't stand for liberty. It's just, I don't know. Everyone has a stake in liberty. That's true. But I would have thought that it was sort of generally regarded as out of the bailiwick of moms as moms. Moms qua moms, let's say. Not that moms can't, outside of their roles as moms, be vociferous and robust in their support for liberty. It's just, it seems a little dumb. But anyway, the local chapter started earlier this year. The group includes members with children in and outside of Williamson County schools, and liberty could be the concern of everyone. The group shared their findings from a review of several wit and wisdom books to audiences at their CRT 101 event last month, at which they teach you about things that don't have anything to do with CRT. So, their curriculum should be called into question, I think. The head of the Williamson County chapter of Moms for Liberty, Robin Steenman, that's the person who was complaining in our clip that we read out of the Substack from Professor Bailey here, brought several books included in the curriculum and presented excerpts to the Williamson County Commission's Education Committee in May. And by the way, I guess at some point I should probably say there's no endorsement involved in this of the wit and wisdom curriculum. I haven't examined it. It might be crap for a number of reasons, but, might also be just fine. Just saying that I don't know anything about it. But the commission that she presented to oversees and approves the school district's budget, but does not make decision on contents of specific budget items. So she's really in the wrong place. It's just that's the forum that was available to her, so she came to complain about that. And she does say, I realize this isn't usually in your lane, but I just wanted you to be aware, Steenman told commissioners. One of the books she specifically referred to was Ruby Bridges Goes to School, written by Ruby Bridges herself. Bridges, when she was age 6, was one of the first African-American students to integrate the New Orleans all-white public school system. Right, we read this part before, and her complaint was that the large crowd of angry white people who didn't want black children in a white school, that's mentioned in the book, too harshly delineated between black and white people. And, I mean, the issue is kind of literally black and white, but, sort of the definition of it, but never mind that. And the book didn't offer redemption at its end. So I don't like the story arc, is the basic complaint. Separate is Never Equal by Duncan Tonatio. I really don't know how you pronounce this last name. Tona, Tiuh, Tonatia. And I'm not sure if that's right, where the emphasis falls. But it is the story of Sylvia Mendez and her family, who fought to end school segregation in California in 1947, 7 years before the Brown v. Board Supreme Court ruling. So, just a good history lesson in general. Like, you may have heard, you kids in K through 5, may have heard of Brown versus the Board of Education, maybe not. But why not get started early and saying, that wasn't the very first challenge. Anyway, I thought that was a good idea. But Steenman said, reading about the differences between formerly white and Mexican schools, as well as the idea that Mexican people, like Mendez and her family, were seen as not smart and dirty forces certain beliefs into the minds of second graders who spend weeks on the book. She said she disapproves of guidance for teachers to teach words like injustice, or unequal, or inequality, or protest, or marching, or segregation in grammar lessons. Please don't teach my children what marching is or what it means, because that's the only way they can I don't know. I don't know. She's just uncomfortable with the idea that they're telling the kids that at a certain time in a certain place, not here, not now, but at a certain other time in another place, people believed stuff that isn't nice and it isn't fair to other people. Please don't tell them that, because then they'll believe that they might not be being fair now. Oh, it might cause them to think about what they're doing or conduct their lives in certain ways. We can't have that. Now, why use wit and wisdom? With a content-based design, wit and wisdom is meant to challenge students to read at a higher level than was expected of their grade level in the past. That's interesting. So they say it's not appropriate on that basis. Dave Allen, the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching, Learning and Assessment, told audiences at the school board's May work session that feedback from teachers and families indicates the curriculum is working and loved by many in the district. Our teachers are reporting to us that our students are reading like they've never read before. Sounds like Trump. Allen told the board, I've received a flood of emails recently that said, don't do anything with the curriculum, my kid's loving it. Well, that's pretty good. He said some books being criticized have long been taught. Research has shown that challenging students to read at the highest level of material that's been deemed appropriate for their grade level gets them reading at or even beyond what's expected of their grade level, Allen said. Makes sense. The change in elementary curriculum did come with the risk of exposing students to certain topics or concepts that may be deemed more appropriate for older age groups by many. Allen said he and his team recognized this but stuck to relying on guidance from the Tennessee Department of Education. Not the most progressive group, I'm sure, but doing pretty well, as well as other experts and communications with great minds, that is the company to say. These sources and collaborators said the materials were age appropriate. The district has to apply for a waiver to use wit and wisdom with K through 2 students, which the district said isn't uncommon. According to the state, at least 34 other districts applied for and received waivers to teach the curriculum in younger elementary grades. So it's a common thing to do and commonly approved. I'm just interested in the logistics of how you get a curriculum of this sort, of any sort, really approved. I think we'll stop with the story at this point because I think it pretty well establishes that it's a pretty normal book and a pretty widespread or widely adopted curriculum. Now we know a little bit more about it, and I think we confirmed our biases in this one. It was easy enough to do. The complaining parents are just basically overprotective and bordering on out of their minds in terms of, but doing everything that they can to shoehorn anything that teaches anything about the history of integration and its end. Or really, I mean, that's maybe even over specific, but that's exactly what they're teaching about. But basically, illustrating the point that's become the case in these protests against critical race theory at school boards all across the country, that because they don't know what it is they're talking about, they're just assuming that anything that has to do with race, anything that makes them feel like it might make kids uncomfortable because they'll think, oh no, white people in this story did a bad thing and I'm white and so therefore white is bad. And basically anything that makes any mention of race is critical race theory. And I don't know how, I'd be curious how they would come up with some convoluted way of defending it. But basically they're saying anything that mentions any of it. Like, how do you teach the existence of Martin Luther King without running afoul of what they believe is critical race theory labeling, right? Well, he's saying that white people were doing some things that were wrong. Well, he was, yeah, sure, yes, but they were, and we all acknowledge it. It's just sort of interesting. I mean, combining I mean, you always knew it was hypocritical, I guess, at its core, when people run around saying, well, why are you protesting? Why couldn't you have protested like Martin Luther King did? Everybody loved him. Well, of course, not everybody loved him. And contemporaneously, most white reactionaries wanted to see him eliminated, and they succeeded in getting that done. But now, they all say, well, they all understand that he was nonviolent. Why can't you be nonviolent? You mean like kneeling down during the national anthem? Nonviolent? No, not that. He wouldn't have done that. He very well may have. It's just, all right, whatever. But yeah, they have this mythologized idea. We all, to some extent, probably have some mythologized idea about what Martin Luther King was all about. But the people who are pushing back on things and saying everything is critical race theory. Well, why couldn't you be more like Martin Luther King? Well, I don't know. Would you like kids to be more like him? Yes, absolutely. So I can teach Martin Luther King and what he was about and what he was trying to do and what the context of his work was? No, you can't do that. That's critical race theory. Yeah. All right. Well, that's kind of what I thought you were going to say. But it's all right. I think we get it now. Okay. Let's see. I wanted to stop in on a couple of other interesting stories. Which one first? How about this one? There's yet another book out that says that Trump sucks. And that's great. It's always good news. Could you put it in the K through 2 curriculum? It's possible. You could probably make a children's book out of the Trump presidency pretty easily. You'd have to simplify things a little, which is odd, given that he was basically running for the consumption of, his materials was for consumption by K through 5 educated people, but who were 18 plus and could vote. But it would make a great children's book also just because I'm thinking the illustrations of Donald Trump would be fantastic. The things you could do with him and get creative with his orange skin and the big giant, piss-stained bouffant that he had. Anyway, so much you could work with. But there's another new book, this one designed for adults, about how bad Trump sucked. And this one's from Michael Wolff, who was in the habit of writing sensational books about how badly certain people prominent in our society suck. Well, this one is Donald Trump. New book, new excerpt from the book. These things come out in drips and drabs, and it's frustrating all by itself, as we've mentioned a number of times in the past, about how much stuff people know about contemporaneously with the guy's service in office, but they say, I'll wait until later to sell it as a book, rather than alert America to the danger of what's going on now so that we can do something about it. Not that we would ever do anything about it, but it's just I would rather have known. But anyway, I'm stuck now instead getting excerpts from Business Insider, because there's no way I'm buying this book. I mean, it's not that I'm opposed to it or anything like that. It's just I'll never read it. I just think that's realistic. And I'll just read these excerpts instead. Trump, the headline says, wanted to use the COVID-19 pandemic to call off the 2020 election, Wolff book says. That's what Wolff's claiming, or rather that's what Mia Jankowicz in Business Insider is claiming that Wolff is claiming in his book, which I haven't read and probably won't get to, but I'll read this encapsulated version of this particular claim. Next week, there'll be another wild claim that, why didn't you tell us about that one at the time? I don't know. All right, so let's see. We'll just zoom through this if we can. President Donald Trump suggested using the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse not to hold the 2020 election, according to a new book. An excerpt from Michael Wolff's book, Landslide, The Final Days of the Trump Presidency, published in the Times of London on Tuesday. That would be the original source here, but we don't have access to that. Said that Trump raised the prospect twice over the summer. Should never have been raised once, but he raised it twice. The excerpt said that in July 2020, Trump had been mulling ways of managing the pandemic without angering his largely anti-mask, anti-lockdown political base. Then, Wolff wrote, Trump brought up another idea, delaying the election over the pandemic. He later spoke of, quote, calling it off, the book said. Well, that's the same thing. And this is interesting. So this is his preferred reaction to this. He recognizes the basic truth here that we all recognize. But Well, as it happens, Democrats reacted to it basically. Well, here's the reality. People can't get to the polls. It's a national emergency, right? Trump was quoted as saying. And here, the Democratic response is, well, why don't we have them vote in with as much social distancing involved as possible? We mail everybody ballots. We put drop boxes out there. And then people can drop their ballots off, just like absentee voting by mail. But instead of the regular absentee voting rules, we'll have different rules that say you don't have to say you're going anywhere and that you'll be away on election day, and that's why you need an absentee ballot. You can just say there's a pandemic and I don't want to stand in line with other people and pass that pandemic, pass those germs around, which Greg noted for us yesterday that a study had finally established had in fact been the case. I mean, I think everybody knew it would be the case, which is why people didn't want to do it, but you couldn't know for sure without having an actual study, and lots of people, were stuck standing in line anyway, and now we have results. Yes, it was dangerous. We shouldn't have done it. But interesting that his version of it is people can't get to the polls. Oh, well, that's all there is to it. We just can't have an election. It's good old American can't-doism in Donald Trump. Just like Republicans campaign continuously that America is a hellhole, but they love it, and you don't. Well, good old American can't-doism. Well, it can't get to the polls. There's just no way to figure this out with half a year of lead time. Sorry. America can't do. Mark Meadows, then the White House chief of staff, stepped up to say that there was not a constitutional possibility, Wolf wrote. Like you could, I guess, just simply, not hold the elections because the infrastructure just isn't there to do it. I mean, there are circumstances in which you could imagine that happening. It doesn't change anything. Your term ends, is probably what he really told me. You're not going to stay in office because we suspend the elections. You will be out of office, and then we won't have anyone available to serve as president without going down the list. You'll be kicked out. But anyway, Trump seemed unconvinced because, he doesn't understand words. I'm sure there might be a way, but, well, he said, according to Wolf. So that's interesting. Are you unconvinced, sir? Yes. Why is it that you're unconvinced? Because I'm sure there must be a way, but I don't know what it is. So, well, really, it's not that you're... I guess that's the best you can say. He's unconvinced that Meadows is right, but he can't articulate why anyone should believe him. But he's president of the United States. Trump again raised the idea a few days later at a debate preparation session in Bedminster, New Jersey, for which we were paying, of course, with Chris Christie, according to Wolf. I'm thinking of calling it off, Trump told Christie, the book says. And it's such a dumb statement that Christie says, the prep? You mean preparing for the debate? You want to call that off? No, the election. I'm thinking of calling it off. So what? You're thinking. First of all, you're not thinking. Second of all, even if you were, what difference would it make? You're thinking this, but that can't happen, so shut up. No, the election. Too much virus, Trump was said to have replied. But of course, it's not dangerous. Don't worry about it. Come to my rally. Too much virus for the election, but not too much from my rally, and I'm going to kill Herman Cain. All right. Well, anyway, according to Wolf, Christie then told him, you can't do that, man, adding, you do know you can't declare martial law. You do know that, right? I mean, he's checking, just to be sure. The idea of postponing the election was definitely on Trump's mind around this time, if you can imagine his having one. On July 30th, Trump caused outrage by suggesting in a tweet that the election might have to be delayed because of his bogus concerns about mail-in voting. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA, he wrote. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote? 3 question marks? No, period. Anyway, as Insider's Grace Panetta reported, I guess at the time, the president does not have that power. So, yeah, thanks for reporting that one. Liz Harrington, a representative for Trump, did not immediately respond to Insider's request for comment on the excerpt, but she tweeted on Tuesday that, quote, all these stories from the Michael Wolff book are not true. Good job. Wolf has previously been accused of making errors and exaggerations in his work on Trump. Several reporters had noted discrepancies in his 2018 book about Trump sucking called Fire and Fury, according to CNBC. In response, Wolf told CNBC that he certainly and absolutely stood by his work. Doesn't really settle anything, but there it is. In a tweet defending his latest book, Wolf said that he included only episodes that Trump's staff had confirmed or that came from several other sources. So, whoop-de-doo. Does that convince you? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. It's easy to believe that Trump would be that stupid and that, and be willing to make that kind of an overreach. But there you have it. That's the new Trump Sucks book excerpt of the day. You need to know about it before we head into the weekend, I guess. All right. Let's see. One more short-ish bit that we might be able to fit in here. Has nothing to do with nothing, but always keeping an eye on what's up with the Saudish folks and what they're doing these days. Brian Schwartz reporting for CNBC. This is interesting. Saudi Arabia, he doesn't say it that way, funds new digital news platform in the U.S. and launches a White House lobbying effort as well. Now, it's to be expected that they would try with a White House lobbying effort. That's something they do all the time. Not a great idea. Worries us. It'd be interesting to know what the hell happened in all of this and to get a sense of transparency here. But what about this funding a new digital news platform? That's certainly something it's within their power to do, and they have plenty of money, so it can happen. What will it be like? Is it sort of an Al Jazeera kind of a thing? Is it anti-Al Jazeera? Because that's Qatari, right? And they're at odds. I'm just sort of curious about this. In case we don't get all the way through it, the key points are summarized up here in bullet form. Saudi Arabia is funding a digital news platform that will feature some U.S.-based media professionals as it begins a new lobbying effort aimed at the White House and Congress. So they're coordinated, these two things. It's not just two things they happen to be doing at the same time. The platform will have a studio in Washington, D.C., and the developments come almost 3 years after do you remember this? The killing of Washington Post journalist and Saudi royal family critic Jamal Khashoggi. Just pointing that out. Saudi Arabia is funding a yet-to-be-announced digital news platform, which will have a studio in Washington, as the kingdom begins a new lobbying effort aimed at the White House and Congress. They're very adept at doing these things. And they didn't have to have their own platform before when they started this thing. Remember way back when, like in October of, 2-3 years ago, when before we knew about Jamal Khashoggi, we were reading about their efforts, or MBS's efforts about having, glossy magazines about the new Middle East and how he was some sort of new generation, new kind of leadership for the Middle East. And we've discussed it since. But now they're just going to put this stuff out directly, I guess. The new effort, which has yet to be reported, is backed by a subsidiary of the Saudi Technology Development and Investment Company, or Taqnia, Taqnia. According to a new foreign lobbying disclosure filed with the Department of Justice. So they're on top of filing those things, at least. Not like Mike Flynn. Journalists and presenters involved in the project have past experience at Fox News, but also at Al Jazeera, that makes some sense, NBC, and Sirius XM satellite radio. The creation of what one of the documents calls a news platform, and that's in quotes for some reason, comes as the kingdom has started hiring a new team of lobbyists as the Saudis and the Saudish seek to access President Joe Biden's administration and the new Congress. And here we can probably say more accurately, as the Sauds seek to access Joe Biden's administration. It's the family. That's who runs the country. Okay. It arrives almost 3 years after the death of Washington Post journalist and Saudi royal family critic Jamal Khashoggi. I guess I'm a Saudi royal family critic too. Boy, I should watch out. A recent U.S. intelligence report says Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved the operation to capture or kill Khashoggi. They helpfully remind us. Biden, however, opted not to punish the Crown Prince for his alleged role in Khashoggi's death. Maybe that's a bad idea. Yeah, how you do it is awfully delicate, I must say. I'm not certain I know how you bring that up and exactly how you execute it. We held accountable all the people in that organization, but not the Crown Prince, because we have never, that I'm aware of, when we have an alliance with the country, gone to the acting head of state and punished that person and ostracized him, Biden said in a recent interview with ABC News. I don't know whether I would agree with that one or not, but we don't have a great record on it. That's certainly true, especially where we have strategic allies. All right, be right back. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Let's continue on with the story, the backstory on this Saudi Arabia news platform. I think it could become important and interesting to track along the way, and maybe having these details will save us some grief later on, or let us refer to some of this stuff in shorthand when they run into trouble at some point. So where were we here? Yes, right. We were a little weirded out by American foreign policy and its inability to hold people accountable directly for murders that they order. But no news there. The subsidiary backing the news initiative is Taknia ETS, a company that focuses on engineering and technological services for Saudi Arabia. And again, we are never sure when we say things like that. Are we talking about the Saud royal family? It's just something that they want to do, or is it really more like that thing that we call the nation state of Saudi Arabia? No idea. Can't tell you. I mean, whatever. We could debate that forever. PitchBook says Taknia is based in Saudi Arabia, which prefers to invest in the life sciences and health, security and defense, information and communications technology, material sciences, energy and environment, and water technology sectors. I'm not even sure what we're gathering from this. They're based in Saudi Arabia, and I guess Saudi Arabia prefers to invest in that, but oddly they are investing instead in Taknia and their news stuff. I guess that's what we're supposed to take away from this. Taknia's website says it is owned by the kingdom's over $400 billion public investment fund, the country's massive sovereign wealth fund that's meant to invest into projects and help boost Saudi Arabia's economy. The lobbying disclosure report says Taknia ETS is supervised and financed by the Saudi Ministry of Information, so the Saud royal family and their PR machine. I mean, that's kind of what it is. If you don't want it to be that way, don't be a kingdom, I guess. Have a democracy. The PIF's executive board includes members of the royal family, such as the Crown Prince. And who else would it include? But close allies, if not members of the royal family. So, I mean, it's not that I'm just biased against Saudi Arabia. I mean, I guess I am, but that's the truth of it. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is the Saud's personal money, and they're looking to make plenty more with it and also accomplish some strategic goals. And this lays out the facts. The PIF, Public Investment Fund, is probably controlled by the executive board, consisting mostly of members of the royal family. The end. The lobbying documents give a glimpse into the upcoming Saudi-led news venture. One of the lobbying disclosures shows that a company called Primetime Media is helping lead the effort. Primetime Media's CEO, Eli Nakuzi. I'm maybe pronouncing the name correctly. Elie-Nakouzi. Eli Nakuzi is assisting in the creation of the new digital news organization. His company is getting paid at least $1.6 million, the documents show, to help guide the project. So take note. See what you learn about them and Primetime Media. The purchase order included in the lobbying disclosure describes the work being done by Primetime Media as English content for news platform. More than $75,000 has already been spent on equipment, freelancers, and a Washington, D.C. studio, the documents say. The lobbying filings were signed by Nakuzi last month, and the purchase order included with the disclosure is dated September 2020. The order form is marked by Taknia ETS's logo. One of the documents listing Nakuzi says Primetime Media will, quote, assist client in the video production of English news content. In doing so, registrant will not participate in the dissemination of said news content. Nakuzi, who, according to the disclosure, has citizenship in Lebanon but resides in the United States, has a history of working in Middle East media circles. While working for an Arabic television network, Nakuzi interviewed then-President George W. Bush during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Does it say what the Arabic television network was? Maybe if I click through, it will tell me. Al Arabiya, right? Okay, so that was the second out of the box of the new Middle Eastern platforms, Al Jazeera being the first and Al Arabiya being the second. And was Al Arabiya Saudi-backed as a counter to Al Jazeera? I can't recall whether I feel like I've read that in the past. Anyway, continuing on here, Nakuzi confirmed to CNBC in an email several aspects of Taknia's project, including that it will be a new online platform and that a studio has been created. He declined to comment further on the news content of the upcoming site and referred all questions to Taknia, who did not respond to requests for comment. Taknia plans to launch an international online platform before the end of this year, Nakuzi said in an email Tuesday. As for the studio, we have built a fully equipped virtual green room for future use, he added, while noting that it will be based in Washington. Primetime Media is not entitled to speak on their behalf. We are a video production house, and we don't do lobbying or PR services, Nakuzi said. Eric Ham and Craig Boswell, two U.S.-based journalists, will be anchoring online shows for the Saudi-funded venture. Both Ham and Boswell have so far been paid $6,000 each for what's described on the disclosure reports as being writers and presenters. Anyone know them? Mr. Eric Ham and Mr. Craig Boswell will be hosting online shows that are still in production phase, Nakuzi said in the email. Boswell and Ham did not return requests for comment before publication either. Okay, so plenty there for us to research and look into. Are you curious? I am. I'm going to just look up Eric Ham, although I'm afraid to see what I get by way of returns here, and I'm not too worried about it. I mean, it's not like his name is Eric Porn Dildo or anything like that, but you never know. Well, let's see. Lots of photos here. Eric K. Ham, contributor to the Washington Diplomat, according to a LinkedIn profile that may or may not be the Eric Ham we're talking about here. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people here. There's an Eric Ham, author, political analyst, writer, based in Washington, D.C., got a Facebook page. Here he is appearing as an analyst for U.S. politics for the BBC and appearing on C-SPAN. And, yeah, all right. So, I mean, you know, so far a pretty normal-looking background just from the quick Google search on the guy. Let me see what the other name was. I mean, I don't expect to find, you know, escaped criminal, you know, from a mental institution or anything like that. But I'm curious, you know, whether they're Fox people or whatever. But this guy appears to be, you know, sort of freelancer and stringer, maybe BBC related. Craig Boswell, freelance correspondent, NBC News. So, okay. Hiring, in other words, mainstream American reporters for their effort, and it's probably a good idea to give them the best access to American consumer minds. You have to present them with something that they're going to recognize. All right, so there you go. You're on notice that that's happening. We'll keep an eye out for how well they do and whether or not they can worm their way into the mainstream with their content. Here's a weekend-ish sort of story that you might have heard about via Twitter, but if you haven't, Daniel Dale, probably one of the better people to tell you about it and tweeting about this. I saw this the other day. It's a couple days ago. July 6th, he was tweeting this. Right-wing site The Post Millennial ran an article, and I guess it went viral in right-wing news sources, ran an article saying that the players on the U.S. women's national soccer team had apparently comported themselves, as they said, disgracefully in some way here. The story basics here are that before the start of one of their games, a recent game, the national anthem was played as usual. I mean, you could debate the wit and wisdom of doing something like that in front of every sporting event, but that's what we do. And in this case, it was the performer responsible was a 98-year-old World War II veteran, as I understand, and he was playing the national anthem on a harmonica. Okay, sure, why not? Sounds fun and interesting. So someone was circulating the television footage of this thing, and, there he is on the field playing the harmonica, and they zoom over to the players who stand in a line typically. They start out, when they come out and they announce the lineup, and, they stand in the at ease position, sort of in a line, shoulder to shoulder, hands behind the back, and the guy is announced and he starts playing the national anthem. Now, at that point, some of the players then turn. Now, it's reported in the news. I saw some of the video of the news reports that they turned their back on him. Well, nobody turns their back on him at all. They turned, it looks to me, like a quarter turn, 90 degrees to their right. So they're no longer facing directly at the gentleman playing the harmonica. And this is what the far-right news organizations are saying was outrageous. Outrageous! They turned their back during the national anthem. Well, I mean, the first clue should be that they didn't turn their backs. Like, why did you turn 90 degrees to the right? You would make someone say, what are they doing that for? And not all of them did it either. But it makes you say, what are they doing? If they're turning their backs, like if they turn 180 degrees, I'd say that looks like they're turning their backs on the national anthem. Although I might say, what are they doing? What are they looking at? And then I would take a look. Well, how are they comporting themselves in this situation? Have they got fists in the air? Are they taking a knee? Any of the recognized regular protests? So turning your back could be one. Being, not new, but different from what we're used to seeing. But then I would check out, well, what does the rest of their body language tells me? Like, for instance, the fact that they have their right hand over their heart and head up high. It would make me say, why, it looks almost as though they were saluting the flag. And indeed they were. Of course, what had happened here was the national anthem began playing, and patriots that they are, they turned to face the flag as opposed to facing the 90-year-old, very interesting and honorable guy playing the harmonica. It's not the music you're saluting, it's the flag, you see. So they turned to face the flag. Actually, the proper protocol. The people who actually didn't turn, I guess, actually are the ones who weren't following proper protocol, but it's no crime or anything like that. But the first thing, what Daniel Dale here is pointing out, not only was it ridiculous for them to start screaming, oh my God, disgraceful, disgraceful, but when it was pointed out to these same right-wing news sources, that no, they weren't turning their backs on anybody. They were, in fact, following proper protocol. What did they do? they immediately pivot to, oh, well, the ones who didn't turn are the ones who were disgraceful. Disgraceful, I hate them, I can't stand it. And that's what Daniel Dale is tweeting about here. Right-wing website The Post Millennial ran an article saying U.S. players were, quote, disgraceful, in all caps, for turning to the right during the anthem. Then, when that nonsense was debunked, they changed the article to say the other players were the ones who were disgraceful for not turning to the right. I guess all they wanted to do was attack some women's soccer players, and they couldn't get right which one they ought to be screaming about. So once they were, they got dunked on, they said, so that, I just thought that was kind of amazing. And in case you missed that episode, feels like something you should be aware of for the weekend. Not specifically for the weekend, just whatever. Another thing we didn't get to during the week, I want to at least give some mention to the fact, and I'll use the Daily Kos write-up from Dave Neward, I think was the one who did this one, noting for the record that I guess last weekend, this is how far behind we are, a bunch of, I don't know what's, one of the new young organizations of white supremacist idiots, this one with in their uniform is khakis and black shirts and white neck gaiters that they use to cover up their faces, and it's supposed to make them look like scary and anonymous, marched in Philadelphia over the July 4th weekend. It's not an illogical place to go in terms of, it being the Declaration of Independence that was, hashed out in Philadelphia. It makes a certain amount of sense. But, from an organizational and logistics standpoint, white supremacists marching in Philadelphia, really, anything marching in Philadelphia, quite honestly, the Mummers Parade marching in Philadelphia has got a 50-50 chance of getting stuff chucked at it by Philadelphians. There's tough people, not because they, in this case, properly tough and a good response to them because they chased them out of Philadelphia, basically turned the march around. And it didn't even really escalate to violence. And I know a lot of Philadelphians sometimes hate being stereotyped this way, but this is one of the good ways to do it. So, as I said, Dave Newart wrote it up at Daily Kos. Fascist marchers in Philadelphia forced into humiliating retreat by angry local residents. I like the concept, and there's some good video in here too. And, it's one of the better things you'll see. Young fascists of the Patriot Front stepped up their gathering campaign to grab public attention this past holiday weekend by organizing a march of uniformed members through downtown Philadelphia on Saturday. And while their secretive organization managed to catch everyone in the city by surprise, they kept their secret. That's good. The whole affair rapidly disintegrated into a humiliating debacle. A handful of counter-protesters began amassing about 3 blocks into the march and forced the Patriot Front marchers, about 200 strong, to retreat to the safety of rental trucks that had brought them. As they attempted to flee, Philadelphia police pulled over their trucks and began handcuffing the men. They started engaging with citizens of Philadelphia who were none too happy about what they were saying. These males felt threatened, and at one point somebody in their crowd threw a type of smoke bomb to cover their retreat. That's the group here. They brought their own tactical retreat weapons. And they literally ran away from the people of Philadelphia. Philadelphia police officer Michael Crum told WPVI-TV. And during the short-lived march, the Patriot Front group, who appear to have been comprised of men from outside the state, chanted, "Reclaim America," and "The election was stolen." All of them wore white they're calling them cowl masks, covering the lower portion of their faces, and were attired in matching khaki pants and, blue tops, apparently. I guess a dark navy. As they marched outside Philadelphia City Hall, pedestrians began confronting them. Eventually, brawls erupted, and some of the small shields the men carried, and why do you allow that, were wrested from their grasp. Ironic, given their support of the January 6th insurrection, no doubt, and thrown back at them as they fled. A local activist, Abdul Ali Muhammad, told the Inquirer that the men began tossing smoke bombs and under cover of the smoke hit and kicked counter-protesters. And said he had been hit in the knee with a shield. They were prepared. They were hitting people, trying to get behind you in a group, Muhammad said, trying to get alongside of you, trying to separate people. So they were actually there for a fight. It's just they lost the fight. That's actually kind of interesting too. And of course, bringing tactical equipment like smoke bombs. Why they allow people to assemble masked and with shields? I mean, masks I understand at least of late, but not like this. And those neck gaiters don't do anything to help stop the virus anyway. But yeah, I've long puzzled over why, and I mean, lots of people have told me, no, you're not puzzled. The police allow it because they're allied with these groups. Why they allow people to assemble with makeshift armor and makeshift weapons and shields. Like normal people don't carry shields when walking through the city. So anyway, I don't know. I found that very interesting and troubling to an extent, but congratulations to Philadelphians for standing up for themselves and kicking these guys out. And I wish you'd kicked harder, but you did what you could do. And if they had smoke bombs, and interesting too that they used the smoke bombs not to necessarily to cover retreats, but rather so that I guess they couldn't be picked up on film very easily when they did manage to isolate some of the counter-protesters and try and beat them up. So anyway, good call by Philadelphia in that one. All right, let's see. A couple other things that I wanted to share and running low on time in this one. One, I'll just note in passing, again, a story worth picking up on. Here's the headline from crosscut.com. Don't know Crosscut, but, looks to be covering, according to the top banner here, politics, culture, equity, environment, opinion, etc. This headline, Seattle Police Union pushes back on January 6th investigation. What's happening here, what you need to know that's of some interest, the city's police watchdog is investigating 6 Seattle police officers who were in D.C. on January 6th. Wink, wink, we know why. Or, well, they're investigating why, I guess. And the problem is that the union has now filed a grievance over that. Seattle's largest police union has been working behind the scenes to limit the city's investigation into 6 officers who were in D.C. on the 6th, the day a mob breached the Capitol building. There's an update here that's saying that the investigation so far calls for firing 2 of those Seattle police officers. The union and its members are specifically targeting the Office of Police Accountability, which on Thursday, that was yesterday, is likely to release the findings of its investigation. I guess they did. That's why the update. Into whether the officers participated in the insurrection or only attended a rally on behalf of former President Donald Trump. On May 27th, the Seattle Police Officers Guild filed a grievance against the city alleging that investigators' demands for travel receipts, photos, text messages, and other documentation of the officers' attendance violated the non-discrimination clause of the union's contract with the city. The union has called on the Office of Police Accountability, which is tasked with investigating external and internal complaints against police employees, to destroy personal records that it's collected from the 6 officers. At the same time, one officer who was in D.C. has accused a top civilian employee with the OPA of leaking his name to Crosscut. The city's Human Resources Investigation Unit is looking into those allegations. Crosscut has declined requests to aid in the investigation and does not comment on sourcing. Anyway, bottom line of this here is that they say that it's a violation of the non-discrimination clause in their contract because the investigation into their activities on January 6th is actually discriminating against them for having conservative political views, as opposed to, attending an insurgency aimed at overthrowing the United States government. If you're going to overthrow the United States government, well, you got problems. I assume that there's some kind of oath that you take as a police officer, probably to uphold the Constitution as well. And if you're not going to do that, then it's an issue of interest to the police authorities. But that was, I thought, an interesting and inventive attempt at blocking it. I don't think it's going to work. No, it's not a matter of discriminating against you for being conservative, nor a matter of discriminating against you for being interested in travel. It is, we're worried about whether or not you attempted to overthrow the United States government, and that seems like a legitimate interest. All right. One other story I wanted to share with you that I saw reported and read a little bit about, but I didn't necessarily set it aside for special attention. But I had it brought back to my attention by an email sending me a link to the story. Let's see if I can dig up the source. I think it was our frequent email correspondent Dave R., who sent us this one, and I don't know whether he I can't recall offhand what our identification policy is on Dave and whether or not he wants his entire name read out. But he sent me this piece here, also from Insider. Is it Business Insider as well? No, just Insider. I don't know if there's a family of publications or not, but this piece has a local interest angle, Virginia. The FBI says it infiltrated a militia-style group's Bible study after tracking a suspect in the Capitol riot. Interesting cover that's being used here. They may or may not actually be interested in Bible study, this group, but it struck me as an interesting cover, just like this is an interesting way of trying to get out of being investigated. You're violating the non-discrimination clause, or yes, the Sauds are lobbying for favorable treatment for various reasons, but we're going to do it via a news channel, or things like that. Or, for instance, Ruby Bridges' book is actually critical race theory, trying to stuff it under that umbrella. This reminds me of the same sort of maneuvering. So what's going on here? The FBI says it infiltrated a militia-style group after tracking a suspect in the Capitol riot. I guess the fact that you're doing Bible study here lets you say it's a First Amendment violation for the government to be investigating us because we're a Bible study group, as opposed to being a violent insurrectionist. New court documents say undercover FBI agents befriended Phi, I guess, Phi, or possibly Phi Duong, D-U-O-N-G, 27 years old. Soon after the riot, Duong is accused of storming the Capitol, and a complaint describes his group's activities. And let's see what we can get through before the bells ring and send us off the air for the day and turning things over to Justice Putnam. A man charged with storming the Capitol on January 6th is also said to have participated in a self-styled militia that referred to its meetings as Bible study and discussed surveilling the Capitol complex after the attack. After? Okay. Phi Duong, 27, was released to home confinement on Friday, maybe not a great idea, after facing multiple charges including disorderly conduct and obstruction of an official proceeding tied to the riot. In a complaint made public Tuesday, the FBI says an undercover police officer encountered Duong in the Capitol on the day when supporters of Donald Trump breached the building and clashed with law enforcement. He described himself to the officer as an, quote, operator, the complaint said, adding that evidence showed he was later spotted inside the building wearing a Japanese-style mask. And it's pictured in the piece here, in case you're wondering what might that mask be. Like a kabuki type thing, I guess. The complaint said roughly a week later, the undercover police officer connected Duong to an undercover FBI employee who embedded himself with Duong's group. Speaking with the FBI contact, Duong said that he was part of a militia-like, quote, cloak and dagger, unquote, group that, quote, can't be out in the open, unquote, and that his job was to find like-minded men to prepare for a, quote, worst-case scenario for Virginia, the complaint said. And a couple of embedded tweets about the subject here. The complaint said that Duong sent a message to the undercover FBI contact indicating that one of our guys was, quote, patrolling outside the Capitol, and that another group member later sent a message saying he took footage of the west and east sides of the Capitol and would upload it to an encrypted site. But again, this is all taking place actually now after the January 6th insurrection, which I think it's meant to imply that perhaps something similar may happen again in the future, as many people have worried might be the case. I guess we might as well, this is as good a time as any to note, for instance, that... oh, well, for one thing, we'll note that our music isn't working. There we go. We hit the button a couple times because some keyboard buttons were pressed accidentally. Anyway, they are now removing some of the last layers of the additional fencing that went up after the January 6th insurrection. And that might be, worth taking note of, especially since there are groups that are still saying they're surveilling the Capitol for some sort of tactical intervention. On February 12th, the FBI employee attended a meeting at Duong's house described as a Bible study. The group, however, discussed only 2 Bible verses, the complaint said, with the rest of the meeting spent on planning other meetings and talking about firearms and future training, just in case you were wondering how thin is the cover. The complaint did not show any charges stemming from violence on January 6th, but said Duong repeatedly expressed his willingness to engage in conflict, including violence, against groups that share different views than his own. So we'll keep an eye on this development and the trend, I guess, we'll see whether it develops into a trend of using Bible study as a cover for these things. Time now, though, for us to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and depart for the weekend. We'll see you again on Monday. That's the plan, anyway. What's Justice got on tap? Let's see. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Good. More M. Trader Green content after this. We'll see what's up.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right, pretty simple. She keeps making anti-Semitic comments because it helps her with Trump's base. That seems to be the issue. And no matter how many times they make her go to rehab at the Holocaust Museum, she just won't stop. Obviously, a habitual offender. More about that coming up next, of course, plus more from around the country and around the world, as always. See you Monday.